by Studio Wendy at Scrapbook Graphics.
Today we are looking at the die cut it actions. Die cuts have been hot in the paper world for a while now, and they've just kind of started to creep into digital. And we're going to look at some ways that we can use die cuts in our layouts. Die cuts simply means to cut out a shape from paper that is not square edges. So it can be a rounded corner, it can be the shape of an element, it can be any shape that you want to cut out of your background paper. There are 3 different action sets for the die cuts, 1, 2, and 3, and they each give you a little bit of a different look or option. We're going to run through all 3 of those here. So the first thing you want to do with each of these actions is run the paper grid action. So we're going to work with number 1 first here. I'm going to select the paper grid option and press play. In this particular case, we're going to use 7 papers. We're going to create a random grid of those 7 papers. And then when we create our die cuts, these papers will end up showing through. So let's press continue. We're prompted here to select 7 papers one at a time. So I'm here in my papers folder, and I'm going to turn on cover flow here on my Mac so I can scroll through the papers and look at them. And I'm going to end up choosing several interesting papers that will show through some pattern or color behind my main paper. I'm going to try to choose a variety of different colors as I go through so that will give some interest to the page as it is created. Let's go with the wood one. Once the papers have been chosen, the action will go ahead and go through and cut up little chunks of them to place here on our grid. And now it's done. You'll see here we have one flattened collage layer, and I can turn these grids off here. I use the Command semicolon keystroke to turn those off really easily. And then we've got our nice little grid here of papers. You can use that in and of itself if you want to for anything. But now we're going to move on to the cutting section of the action, and that's here. We're going to make 3 rows. In this particular action, we're going to get 3 rows of die cut here right across the center. So click that and press play. And this lets us know here that we want to have our background layer selected. It's going to be the bottom layer of the page. We're going to be asked to select a paper to go on top of it, and then we're going to cut an object out of it. So just press continue. And when we're prompted here, we're going to select a background paper to put over top. And I like to pick something neutral, a little neutral to go on top here. And then we're asked to select an element. Now you can use any element that you want to use, but keep in mind when you do choose the element that you're going to end up with the shape that you've chosen, the outer shape of it, and it's going to be filled in solid. So if you pick an element like this where you think you have a flower, really all you're going to end up with is this kind of outer circle shape. So you might want to pick something that's a little bit more, has a little bit more shape to it. Let's go ahead and choose this flower. When this box comes up, we'll be prompted to resize the element to fit. Now, you want to get your element to fit as closely into this box as you can. If you have to rotate it some to do that, go ahead and do that. And you don't really want your element to be going off the page here. You want to keep it within the size of this, and you don't want it too small. If you put a super small element on here, it's going to be placed onto your canvas quite small and may not fill the space out correctly. So you want to get as close as you can to the edge without going over. Press enter. All right, and now you'll see here that our element has been used to cut out these shapes here. And if we zoom in, we'll see that it looks as if these elements have been cut out and there's a nice shadow left behind it. I'm going to show you real quick here over on my layers palette. This is the bottom right flower here. And the way that this effect was achieved was using the knockout option here under blending options, and then adding an inner drop shadow. So those are the settings that you can play with if you want to adjust the look of that later. The last thing we're going to do is add the warp, and what the warp does is take some of the shapes that we have here and use the piece that was cut out to sprinkle it around on the page. You'll see more when we go through it. So just press play, and there we go. It cuts out several copies from the top paper here and sprinkles them around on the page. And that is how die cut 1 will look when you're done. And again, this shape can be any shape that you want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and save this layout, and then we're going to move on to number 2. Okay, so we're going to start here with number 2. We're going to do the same thing and make our paper grid first. This time we only need 6 papers. And I'm going to use the same kit here. This is Studio Mix 32 Storytelling. It's a really gorgeous, gorgeous kit. Okay, here's our collage. I'm going to turn those grids off using the Command semicolon key. And now we're going to go through our 3-column action. This one is going to put 3 columns here of the element. It's going to leave a few blank rows here and then put a couple more columns over here. So just press play. In this particular one, because our boxes are vertical, vertical elements are going to work best for the spacing. We need to select our top background paper. And now we're going to choose an element. I'm going to choose this little tag here. Even though it's horizontal, I can go ahead and rotate that so that it's vertical and will better fill this space. And again, we want to get as close to the edge as we can without going over, and press enter. All right, there we go. Very quickly, we've cut out several rows of our shape here, and when we zoom in, you can see it looks like it's been cut right out of that paper. Now we're going to run the cuts action here. This is going to place 3 rows of these banners cut from the same paper here right down the middle. So let's just select that and press play. And there we go. And let's zoom in so you can see the difference. So here we have the cut sitting on top of the paper, and this is where it's been cut out of the paper over here. And that is the second set of die cut actions here. And I'm going to save this and we'll check out the third. Okay, the final set is set number 3. This one is slightly different in the way it works. With this particular one, we are going to cut out a series of circles first, and then we're going to cover them with the papers that we choose. So go ahead and run the circles action first. We're prompted to select one paper that our circles will be cut out of. So let's do that first. This one works a little bit backwards from the way that the other 2 worked. Okay, let me just drag this out of the way for a second so you can see what happened here. We have our background paper, and then we have all of these little circle elements here that we are now going to cover up with our background papers that we choose. So I'm going to bring this window back up here, and we're going to start selecting papers to cover these circles with. We're going to work from the left to right, top to bottom, so that you kind of get a feel for which circles we're working with. For each paper that's chosen, we will be given the opportunity to resize it. That way, if you have a really large pattern and you only want a portion of it to show through, you'll be able to adjust that as it runs. Just press enter when you are happy with it. This is really handy too when you have fun papers that have special edge effects on them. That way you can get a section of that edge to show up in your circle. Here's one of those papers like I was talking about. There's a nice drawing that's over in the corner. If I use this section of the paper, I'm going to have a fairly plain looking piece, but if I use this section, I can get a nice graphic in there, and I can resize it smaller if I want more of it to show. So that's the kind of flexibility that we have here. When you are resizing your papers, you want to make sure that you keep an eye on your height and width up here. You don't want to enlarge your papers very much beyond 100% if you want to maintain your quality. So you might want to keep just an eye on that little measurement up there. A fun thing to do as well is use the same paper, but use it at a different size to get a different bit of a look here. So this one, I'm going to use the same paper that was used in this corner up here, but I'm going to use a much smaller piece of the pattern for a bit of a more interesting look. Okay, there we are. So now we have all of our paper circles covered here, and when we zoom in, we can see that it looks like those circles are showing behind our purple paper here. You can, once this has run, if you aren't happy with one of the choices you made, everything's over here is intact. Just grab your move tool and you can reposition if you want the paper, you can resize it, or you can swap it out with another one if you're not happy with it. Now we're going to do something a little bit fun with these circles, and what we're going to do is kind of fill back in this purple paper in the shape of our element to kind of give it a little bit of a different look. And the way we do that, the first thing we want to do is determine which circle we want to place an element on. So if I want to do this green circle up here, I want to scroll down, find that green paper, which is right here, and I want to select the circle that that green paper is clipped to. And with that selected, I want to go ahead and press play on this shape action. And then I'll be given the opportunity to select a shape. So let's grab this flower that we used before. And when it comes up, you might not see it on the screen because it's not on top of that green paper. So we just need to click and drag it over to the paper we want to use here. And then we want to resize it. And the key with this is to resize the element so it's touching at least one corner of this paper. That way it looks like it's still part of that cutout. And when you're happy with the position, just press enter and you'll see what happens here. We've now added back in the paper where that element was. And if we go up and select the element layer, you'll see here on the layers panel, the element layer is still left here. If you want to, you can turn that layer on, unclip it, and then press Command T, resize it down a little bit, add a drop shadow. I've got my styles loaded right here. And let's zoom in and look at it. And then just like that, we have layered our die cut paper with the element we used to create it. It's a really, really fun effect. You can also, rotate it if you want to offset it a little bit, something like that. So you can run this over and over again. The key is find the layer that you want to add an element to. Let's use this big open area over here. Select the circle underneath it, press play. This time I'm going to look for, let's do some word art. Let's do this family word art. If you have a choice between one without a shadow and with a shadow, use the one without the shadow. And then we said we would put it over here. So let's go over here. I'm pressing Command or Control plus to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to grab that. And in this case, I would like this to go pretty much all the way across the circle, like that. Actually, let's take it off it. Let's go like that. Press enter. Now I've added that paper back in, And now I can turn on my family layer, unclip it. Now in this case, if I resize it, it looks kind of funny. So instead, I'm going to show you what you can do here. I'm going to click the family layer. I'm going to expand, let's say 10 pixels. I'm going to go back down to the circle layer and click on not the circle, but the mask next to it. I'm going to use the black foreground color, and I'm going to hold in Alt or Option and press Delete. Let's deselect there, and now you can see we have a little bit of paper going completely around that word art. And now I can take that word art and I can add a small drop shadow if I want to. Lessen it down a little bit there. And now I have that piece of word art layered on top of that paper. So that's another way that you can use that. Or if you don't want the element at all, you can simply turn it off and just use the shapes for the die cuts there. This is really fun to do with a tag too. So that is the die cut 3 action. And so we have die cut 1, 2, and 3, and they all do a little bit something different. And I hope that you have fun with them and create some really unique effects using them. Thanks for watching, and I hope this video has been helpful. I'll see you next time.